InStitches show and the first Friday in March, which means it's time for the next Totally Tunisian calendar blanket square. This month, we're going to focus our attentions on the Tunisian Purl Stitch. The Tunisian Purl Stitch, just like the knitting purl stitch, is created by bringing your yarn to the front of your work, bringing it towards you, before you initiate every single loop on the forward pass. So you're going to find that the forward pass of this particular stitch pattern takes a little longer than the reverse pass. And the reverse pass is just like the last two stitches we learned. So that part is nothing new. The purl stitch has a really fantastic texture, not just on the front or the right side of the fabric, but it creates a really neat texture on the wrong side or the back side of the fabric too. I find when I'm working the Tunisian Purl Stitch that I have a little more control over the manipulation of my yarn and my hook if I brace my work against my lap or the work surface that I'm sitting next to. In fact, Mr. InStitches got a little bit of footage of me doing that, so you can sort of see what I'm talking about. Because we are bringing our yarn to the front of our work before we initiate every single loop on the forward pass, it is easier, I find, to work against a surface than to try and do it all in the air. It just makes controlling that yarn and your tension all that much easier. All right, let's grab our hooks, grab our yarn, we'll head on over to the craft table, and let's stitch up the Tunisian Purl Stitch together. Please visit our shop and purchase a pattern. It helps support our show, and we'll put a link to our shop in the description box down below. In order to make our Tunisian Purl Stitch square, you want around 100 yards in total of a size 4 medium weight yarn. I'm using a 100% acrylic yarn in sage green. That translates to about 90 yards for the pattern stitch square and about 10 yards for the square's border. But today I'm demonstrating in all one color, so that's 100 yards for me. You want a pair of scissors and a yarn needle. You want your Afghan or Tunisian long crochet hook, and optionally a same sized hook but a regular crochet hook. This is a nice way to do the border. Since the border is regular crochet, I find it sort of easier on my hand to switch back to a regular hook for that. But of course the whole square can be completed with just your Afghan hook. The hook I'm using is a 5.5 millimeter, also known as an I or a 9 in the US, possibly a 5 if you have old hooks from the UK, but you can vary the size on your hook depending on your tension requirements, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. So once you've got all that together, we can get started. If you're still relatively new to Tunisian crochet, then working a little sampler stitch of the pattern is a great idea before you launch into the full project. I've worked a sampler over 6 chains. I've done 6 rows. It's easy to count your rows by looking at the running stitch that goes up the right side if you're working right-handed. If you're working left-handed in the mirror image, this will just be on the left side of your square. There's 6 running chains. That means I've done 6 rows in total. This allows you to get comfortable with the pattern. Because you're working a smaller size, you can figure out where you may be having problems a lot easier, and it also gives you a good idea of your tension. So if your tension is too tight, you want to go up a hook size. If your tension is too loose, you want to go down a hook size. So I highly recommend working a little sampler, just like I've done here. Like the previous squares in this series, we're going to start with a slip knot. And we're going to chain 38. That's 3/8 to begin. Row 1 of our Tunisian Purl Stitch is like the row 1 of our other stitches so far. So we're going to be picking up a loop in each of our chains, and we're going to be working the Tunisian simple stitch on the way back. So that row 1 creates the base for the rest of our pattern to be built on. We skip the first chain from the hook, we slip our hook through the next chain, and pick up a loop. And we're going to pick up a loop in each of those chains all the way back. Remember, we count the first loop that's left on our hook after we finished chaining 38. You'll be picking up a loop in 37 of those chains. So in total, at the end of the forward pass of your first row, you will have 38 loops on your hook. Once you've got 38 loops on your hook, and you want to take a moment to count them, you'll probably have it twisting around your Afghan hook. That's normal. Make sure you've got 38 loops. That's one loop for every single one of those chains that you made. And we're going to work the Tunisian simple stitch all the way back. And every single reverse pass for each of the 32 rows in this square is exactly the same. So this should be pretty familiar by now. We yarn over and pull back through the first loop only. That creates the neat little running stitch that's going to work up the far side of our square. And every other sort of crochet all the way back for the reverse pass is yarn over and pull back through 2 loops. Yarn over, pull back through 2, yarn over, pull back through 2. So that reverse pass for every row is exactly the same. It's the Tunisian simple stitch method. Yarn over, pull back through 2. You will have 38 stitches in total at the end of your reverse pass, and you'll be back down to 1 loop left behind on your hook. This should look pretty familiar now. We're back to 1 loop left on our hook, and the first complete row, so forward and reverse pass, the first complete row of Tunisian crochet, we've established our vertical bars. That's these guys that sit going up and down. And of course you've got that little bit of what looks like a weave running in between them. So that should look pretty familiar. You should have 38 vertical bars. The loop that's left on your hook after every reverse pass already is using this vertical bar. So you always will start your Tunisian purl stitch in the second vertical bar from the hook. So this one's already used. There's the loop. We want to pick up loops in all of the vertical bars. How does the purl stitch differ from the simple stitch? Our yarn typically sits to the back of our work, and in order to create loops on the forward pass, we want to do that by keeping the yarn on the front of our work. So now, depending on how you hold your yarn, how you manipulate it, there's a couple ways that you can do this. You can literally pull it forward and hold it along the bottom of your hook, and that frees you up to put your hook through that vertical bar. When you stop, your yarn should be sitting out the front. So you'll see it right here, coming out the front between the loop that's already on your hook and your hook having slid through that vertical bar. So that's one way to do it. The other way to do it, I'm just going to take this out. So back to normal, it's hanging out the back. I want to start. If you control your yarn with your sort of working hand like I do, then you can just lay it over top of your hook. You're still holding it out of the way as you place your hook through that vertical bar. And if you drop the yarn, it should be hanging out the front. So however you want to do that, you want to bring your yarn to the front, slip your hook through the next vertical bar, pause, make sure it's hanging out the front, and now we're going to pick up a loop as normal. So you take your yarn, hold it to the other side so that it crosses that vertical bar, yarn over, and you might want to hold on to that little bump as you pull your hook back through the vertical bar to pull up the loop on your hook. So I know that sounds a little confusing. Don't worry, we're going to do a whole bunch together. What it does is create a little bump, and that is a purl. Here we go. Our yarn is back in the back position again. We want to make sure that we bring it to the front. Here's the next vertical bar. So we've worked this vertical bar, and you can tell we have because there's a loop sitting right over top of it. See that little bump? This little guy right here? This is the next vertical bar. So we want to bring our yarn to the front. You can do that however you want. Slip your hook through that bar. Make sure that your yarn is hanging out the front, and then yarn over. You might find it helpful to hold that yarn with your thumb. I love to manipulate my crochet as I work by holding it right at the root of the loop on my hook with my thumb and forefinger. And yarn over, pull up a loop. Remember, we're just in the loop gathering stage. This is the forward pass. And that creates a bump. So you can see those little bumps there. The little bumps, or purls, will sit right underneath your hook. Yarn is to the back again. We want to make sure we bring it to the front. Here's our next vertical bar. So yarn forward. Insert hook through vertical bar. The yarn is hanging out the front. That's where we want it. Pull it to the side, yarn over, and pick up a loop. in that vertical bar. It creates the little purl that sits underneath our hook. Yarn to the front, hook through the vertical bar, pull the yarn back, yarn over as normal, and pull up a loop on your hook through that vertical bar. And there's the little purl. Let's do a couple more. Yarn to the front, insert hook through vertical bar. If you're confused, stop for a moment. Yep, there's my yarn on the front, so that's in the right position. Now I pull it to the side, yarn over like I normally do. I find it helpful to just hold it in place while I pull back through that vertical bar and pull up a loop. Try not to be too tight. That is the hardest part of this pattern, is maintaining even tension. This is why I suggest doing a little sampler. That can really help you with your speed and your tension and your comfort, especially of getting that yarn to sit forward every time you go to pick up a loop. So yarn out the front, insert hook through vertical bar, yarn over as normal, and pick up a loop in that vertical bar, creating that cute little purl as you go. You can alternatively hold it over the front of your hook as you slip your hook through that vertical bar. Either way, you can see that it still wants to hang out the front, and pick up a loop. That is what we're looking for. These nice little purly bumps. You'll see two sets, one that runs down here and one that runs right underneath your hook. That's what you're looking for. You want to always keep your yarn to the front when you're picking up a loop. So here it is, hanging out the front, however you want to do that. And then I find keeping my thumb on that yarn helps me control the tension of the purl and the loop I pull up. This will take some getting used to, so put your feet up, relax. Remember to pause frequently if you find this stretches out your hand or your wrist, or you have a little bit of pain. Take a break, have some water. Remember, this is not a race. And learning a new method of crochet can sometimes take a little bit of getting used to. There can be a learning curve, so don't worry about it. Just relax. Make sure your yarn is always out to the front before you pick up a loop, and you can work away at picking up some loops in each of those remaining 37 bars. Remember, bar number 1 is already accounted for. We're picking up, by using the purl stitch, we're picking up loops in each of our vertical bars. There'll be 37 pickups, let's say. We'll call them pickups, all the way across the forward pass of our Tunisian purl stitch. So this is row 2, forward pass. Nice and easy, everybody. As you work all the way across, picking up a loop using the Tunisian purl stitch method, and you get to the last loop. Sometimes, you know, this can feel like a lot, so if you need to grip it right on top of your other loops to keep control, go ahead. That's not going to hurt anything. Here's your last vertical bar right on the edge. Same thing, you want to bring your yarn to the front, however that's comfortable. Slip your hook through that vertical bar and bring the yarn forward and around, yarn over like normal. And I like to hold on to that yarn. This is a nice little trick too. Make sure that your loops can sort of roam around on your hook nice and comfortably. That means that your tension is nice. It's not too loose, it's not too tight. You should have cute little bumps running along the edge of your hook. Should look something like that. And you should have 38 loops on your hook again. The return pass, super simple. It's your standard return pass. It's the same one that we use for the Tunisian simple stitch and the Tunisian full stitch. Yarn over. You can now keep your yarn to the back of your work where you're used to having it. So there's no more front work. That's only for the forward pass. Reverse pass is yarn over, not the short tail. Yarn over. pull back through the first loop only. That creates the running stitch that goes up that side. Yarn over, pull back through 2. Yarn over, pull back through 2. Yarn over, pull back through 2. You see how I like to hold my work, thumb and forefinger, right at the root of those loops? I continually re-maneuver my fingers to be in the next 2 loop spot so that I can really keep control over that work. And I'd say that the most common thing I hear from people who are working on Tunisian or sort of experimenting with it for the first time is that they really get hand fatigue. Their fingers hurt, their wrists hurt, because you're holding the hook, in most cases, pretty far back from the actual work, and you're still doing all of that work with your hand. So like I said earlier, if you feel that you're getting a little bit of fatigue, maybe your neck hurts, your shoulders hurt, your hands hurt, whatever, just pause, put your work down, leave yourself a little note telling you maybe what row you're on, if you're halfway through the reverse pass or you're halfway through the forward pass. Go take a little break, grab a glass of water. I do this regularly, so even when I'm filming a tutorial, I take little breaks just to make sure that I don't hurt myself. And it also keeps me calm, and I enjoy the process so much more, because remember, this is a hobby. We're supposed to enjoy it. So yarn over, pull back through 2 loops all the way back. It's your standard reverse pass. And then we will start the Tunisian Purl Stitch forward pass all over again for row 3. Alright, we're back to 1 loop on our hook. That loop represents this vertical bar. Don't feel like you can't move your yarn around to sort of see what you've got. Maybe pull it into a square if you want to. You might see there's quite a gap there if you've got sort of loose, easy tension like I do. If it's really, really tight and you can't see any spaces, you might want to use a slightly larger hook because it'll make things a little easier to manipulate as you go. Easy to count your rows. There's running stitch number 1, running stitch number 2. It looks like just the plain old chain stitch up the side. That means we've done 2 rows. Your vertical bars, if they're hard to see because they want to lean to the right because you just finished your reverse pass, just take a moment and pull backwards on that row and that will pull them all up nice and vertical. The remaining loop on your hook is already in use for that vertical loop, so you want to start by working a purl stitch forward pass into the next vertical bar, and look at that cute little purl stitch that runs along the front. That is such a cute little pattern. Okay, here we go. In order to do the purl stitch, we want to make sure that the yarn is on the front of our hook or to the front of our work before you slip your hook through the vertical bar. If you're sort of confused, pause, make sure it's out the front, then yarn over as normal and pull up a loop. So however that is easiest for you, you want to look for the next vertical bar. Do not confuse the little bumps that might pop up in front of you. If you're confused, stop, pull it back, look for that nice vertical patterning. Here's the next one right here. Slip your hook through it, make sure your yarn's out the front, and then pick up a loop as normal. Pull it to the front again, insert your hook through the next vertical bar, make sure your yarn's to the front, and pick up a loop. I am maintaining a little bit of tension on that yarn as it crosses over top of that vertical bar. So when I place my hook through it and I bring it over top of the vertical bar and then pick up a loop, I'm holding on to it so that I can just create a little bit of extra tension. Now, you don't have to hold your yarn or use your yarn exactly the way I do. I know we're all a little bit different, but all you want to do is make sure that that yarn is on the front of your hook or the front of your work before you slip your hook through that vertical bar, and then yarn over as normal to pick up a loop. This definitely takes a little bit of getting used to, so if you feel it's slow going, then you're doing something right, especially if you've never done this stitch before. So relax, put your feet up, put on a favorite show, and just practice keeping your yarn to the front of your work. Practice making those nice even little pearls. Aren't they adorable? Oh my gosh, I just love this. By the way, this makes also an excellent scrubby dishcloth or washcloth. So if you want to try a smaller version of this square in cotton for a nice little washcloth, then I highly recommend it. It's a great way to practice, and it makes a tremendously good little dishcloth or washcloth. You can put the same border on that we've been using for these squares. Alright, work away at picking up a loop, making sure your yarn is always brought to the front. I'll catch up with you at the end of the forward pass of row 3 of the Tunisian Purl Stitch. Make sure you have 38 loops, one for each of those stitches, and you've got a nice even looking purl stitch running along underneath those loops. So there's the vertical bars that you've picked up the loop in. Bringing your yarn across the front of the vertical bar creates this bump, and then yarn over and picking up a loop like normal creates the little bump on top of it. So you've got kind of almost like a little mini chain link thing going. Don't forget that last vertical bar at the edge, and it's a standard return pass. Yarn over, pull back through the first loop only, and then yarn over, pull back through 2. Oh, make sure you get both of them there. There we go. Yarn over, pull back through 2, yarn over, pull back through 2, yarn over, pull back through 2, and so on. This is the reverse pass of row 3. That's the end of the reverse pass of row 3. We've got a definite purl stitch pattern happening here. You know you finished row 3 because if you look at the side of your square, you've got chain 1, chain 2, chain 2, that nice chain stitch or daisy chain stitch running up the side. There's a third one. That means we've completed row 3. I find that's the easiest way to count rows for this pattern. And you do the exact same thing for every single row going forward. We want 32 rows in total. So that's 3 done. You want to do another, what's that, 29 left, so that you've got 32 rows in total. You'll know all you have to do is count the running chains up the side of your square. Remember, the loop left on your hook already uses these first vertical loop or vertical bar, so you always go to the next vertical bar. Make sure you bring the yarn to the front of your work, however you find that comfortable to do, so that it's out of the way, so that you can pick up a loop in that vertical bar. If you can't tell where the vertical bars are, then hold the edge and pull your last row backwards, and that will pull them all up into alignment, and you can see them pretty clearly there. Insert hook. If you're unsure, pause, make sure your yarn is coming to the front, and then pull it over top. See, it crosses over top of that vertical bar. Yarn over and pick up a loop as normal, and that creates the bumps, the little pearls that sit underneath your hook. I will let you work away at the Tunisian Purl Stitch. For the remaining rows, we want 32 rows in total. Take your time, relax, pour yourself a cup of tea. Remember to take little breaks if you need to. And I'll see you at the end of reverse pass for row 32. I have completed 32 rows of the Tunisian Purl Stitch now. So that's 32 forward passes and 32 reverse passes. Because remember, every row of Tunisian crochet has a forward and reverse pass to it. And look at that lovely purl stitch. It looks like the underside of real knitting with that cute little bumpity bump thing. But here's what I want to know, and please let me know in the comments down below. This is the right side of our purl stitch. Do you like this, or do you like the wrong side of the purl stitch better? This also has a neat little bump running across it, but the bumps are much straighter and they're not doubled up. So really cool texture on both sides. Again, this particular stitch makes a great dish rag or washcloth, and it's super warm, so it's really good for blankets and other warm bits and pieces too. But that is all 32 rows. You can easily count by just counting the chain stitches that run up the side. You should have 32 of them. I am not changing colors in order to put on my border, but if you are, same thing applies. Once you're finished, you can snip your yarn, fasten off, and you can go ahead and grab your other hook to start your border. If you're going to change colors, you'll be joining your yarn with a single crochet in that first vertical bar right there. If you don't want to change colors, and I thought I would do this month since we've now changed colors for the border a couple times, all my square borders are going to be this sage green, but I thought you might like to see what it looks like without cutting your yarn. You can just chain one, and I've switched back to my regular crochet hook now since we're just going to be single crocheting. And into that same vertical bar, if you're joining your yarn, you're going to join your yarn with a single crochet here. If you're just going to use the same color like me, chain one and then single crochet into that first vertical bar of the top of row 32. And then we're going to single crochet in each vertical bar all the way across the top. So just like the other two squares we've done so far, you're working a single crochet into each of those vertical bars. That's a single crochet in each one of those vertical bars all the way across. The last one is the last vertical bar, so single crochet number 38. That's 38 across the top, so there's a single crochet in the last vertical bar. And to turn the corner, chain one and single crochet into the same bar. Now we're going to single crochet down the edge of the first side of our square. It's all very bumpy looking, so what you're doing is looking for the vertical bar at the end of every single row, and it actually helps to pull it apart a little bit. So if you pull gently on your work, you'll see that little vertical bar that sits just on the front edge of the work. So here it is here. Slip my hook underneath it and single crochet. There's the next one right there. Slip my hook under it and single crochet. And you'll be able to see it pretty easily after a while. So if you just pull it apart, if you stretch it a little bit, you can see all of those vertical bars running along. So they're vertical this way, they're horizontal this way, but those are the vertical bars, and you're looking for the one right at the end. So pulling it apart a little bit, don't be rough, but you can pull it apart just to make it a little easier to see. And you're just grabbing the very last vertical bar at the edge of each row and single crocheting in it all the way down. You will have 32 single crochets, one for each row of Tunisian Purl Stitch, all the way down the side, and then we're going to work single crochet number 33 into the first foundation chain we made. And I'll hook up with you there. That's 32 single crochet all the way down the edge, and of course they're worked into the front loop, or the last vertical loop on the edge of each row, and that does make it want to roll forward a little bit, but it does create a nice, neat edge across the back. And of course, once we block this, it'll lie nice and flat. We are going to work single crochet number, oh, I've spun my work a bit here. Here we go. Single crochet number 33 right down here in the bottom on that first foundation chain we made, and of course your tail will probably still be sitting there. So single crochet and then chain one to turn the corner and single crochet in the same place. So single crochet, chain one, single crochet, that changes or turns the corner. And now we're going to work a single crochet in each of those foundation chains all the way across. There'll be 38 single crochet across the bottom of your square. It's pretty easy to see where you want to work your single crochet. You're just slipping your hook in underneath those two loops that make up the bottom of the foundation chains. And that's it. I'll catch up with you once we get to the end of the foundation row. That's 38 single crochet worked all the way across the foundation chains of our square. Number 38 is in that last little chain at the very end. Chain 1 and single crochet in the same place. And now we're going to single crochet in those front vertical loops. Very easy to see. We're on the home stretch all the way up the other side. So there'll be 32 single crochets, one for each row. And of course this one down here makes number 33. So there's 33 single crochets on each side and 38 across the top and the bottom. You're just grabbing the front loop, that is the vertical loop that's at the start of each row. So you're not sticking your hook underneath the whole thing, you're just grabbing that front vertical loop for consistency's sake, since we used the front vertical loop on the other side of the row. Really easy to see. Go ahead, single crochet in each one all the way up to the top, and we're almost done our March square. That's a single crochet in the front vertical loop of each of those row edges all the way up to the top. Number 33, the last single crochet is going to be worked around the same front post or the front vertical bar as the single crochet that started the whole thing. So single crochet, chain 1, and you can join with a slip stitch to that first single crochet. And that is a solid color square. So I've done the March square with my sage green, and I bordered it with the same color too. I think this is going to add kind of a neat change up to my blanket. So that is the purl stitch with the border. You can snip your yarn, fasten off, grab your yarn needle, and weave that tail in across the back. I like to use the stitches of the border because they're right there. Weave it in back and forth a few times to make sure that tail isn't going to go anywhere. And then you're going to want to give a little bit of light blocking to your square. The neat thing about the Tunisian Purl Stitch is that it doesn't roll as much as some of the other Tunisian stitch patterns. Yet another neat little thing we keep discovering about all these different Tunisian stitches, they all act a little different. Some of them are tight, some of them are wide, some of them are narrow, some of them are very rolly, and some of them are not rolly at all. And I've just given my purl stitch square a little bit of a light blocking because the purl stitch doesn't really want to roll as much as some of the other Tunisian stitch patterns. It didn't require much. I did, however, put it face down on my blocking surface, and I gave it a nice light steam blocking. I squared it up, I straightened and flattened the edges, and now it's all nice and neat and tidy, ready to lie flat alongside the other squares until it's time to put them all together. And that is the Tunisian Purl Stitch. Added bonus, it does not want to curl like some of the other Tunisian stitches we've learned so far. So I did block it. That makes it nice and flat and almost a perfect square. Remember, I'm blocking all of my squares as I go this year, and then we will be assembling our project at the end, and you can put your squares in any order that you want. And I'm going to be re-blocking the blanket once it's all put together. So that'll probably be the only time I block it, because after you wash a blanket and you allow it to flat dry, generally it doesn't need blocking any longer. But I find that blocking each of my squares as I go allows them to sort of store nice and flat, so assembling them will be a lot easier at the end of the year. And follow up, a couple people have asked if it's okay to start joining their squares as they go right now, and you're more than welcome to. So we will be stitching them together. We're going to learn a new stitching technique at the end of the year, but you can join your squares any way that you like. It's not going to affect the overall outcome of the blanket. So if you want to kind of stay ahead of the game and put your squares together as we go, you're more than welcome to do so, because there's no precise order for the squares this year. You can sort of assemble them January and March and February, January, February, March, January, April, December, however you want to do it. So we hope you enjoyed learning the purl stitch this month, and we will see you again soon here on the Jayda and Stitches show. Until then, stay safe, stay crafty, and have a great week. Bye guys.
Hi everybody, Mr. InStitches here. Thank you for watching today. Here are some of our other videos you might be interested in. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.